So far, we have configured router 1 to be DHCP server and also router 2 to be DHCP server. Router 1 serving IP parameters to devices on network 3 and on network 4, and router 2 serving IP parameters to devices on network 1 and also on network 2. But in many cases, we will want to have a centralized DHCP service. In the case here, we're going to configure router 1 to provide IP parameters for net 3, also for net 1, and for net 2, and for net 4. Everything sampled in router 1 as a DHCP server with a central DHCP service running on it. This means that when PC3 wants to request its IP parameters, it will send the request to router 2, and router 2 here has to be configured to relay this request up to the router 1 DHCP service. We will continue with static IP addresses on network 5. Here now is shown PC3, router 2 who's going to be our DHCP relay, and router 1 who's going to be our centralized DHCP service. PC3 is represented here by its TCP IP stack, router 2's TCP IP stack, and router 1's TCP IP stack. When PC3 wants to make a DHCP request, it is going to send that DHCP request over to the DHCP service running on router 2. Router 2 will relay that request over to the DHCP service on router 1. Router 1 DHCP service will reply back to PC3 DHCP client. The request will travel over the physical network. And the replies to the request are also going over the physical network. Let us first look at the configuration for router 2. Let us scroll down through the entire configuration. The three interfaces, forwarding options, routing options, policies, and zones. That is all we have to do. In the System Services section, we see that here we only have SSH. The DHCP service is not configured in the System Services section here on router 2. The DHCP is configured in the forwarding options, helpers, and bootp section. Go online and check what bootp is compared to DHCP. The comment here tells us that incoming DHCP requests will be forwarded. The requests will be forwarded over to the 10.10.10.11 address, which is where we have our DHCP server router 1 running the DHCP service. Incoming requests on GE003 and GE004 should be forwarded. So this is the entire DHCP configuration here on router 2. Let us look at the configuration for router 1. Here on router 1 in the System Services section, we see that we have our DHCP local server configuration part. Net 1 is defined on interface 03, and this is special because the interface 03 is the interface that router 2 will send requests over to. The network 2 is also on interface 03. A specialty here for network 2 is that as it also has to come in on GE003, it had to be defined in the groups section here on router 1 with the address 10.10.10.11. The configuration does not allow GE003 directly to be configured 2 times here in this System Services section. So a group with GE003 in it had to be created. In the System Services section, we then have to reference this group. Here I have called the group my GE003 group. Further on, we can use this group name down in the interfaces section. Interface GE01 and GE002 are configured as normal, but GE003 is configured as an apply groups here as an example. Finally, let's scroll down to the interesting section here. Our DHCP pools, here net 1 and here net 2. And here we find all the familiar IP parameters that we once shipped out from router 1 via router 2 and into the devices on network 1. The networks directly attached to router 1 are also defined here. Network 3 and network 4. And that's all we have to do. This is the end of the configuration. We should maybe repeat that we have the usual routing options, which will route traffic coming into router 1 until the network 12 and onto the network 13. 12, 13, over to router 2. Let us upload the configurations. First for router 1, Control A, Control C, paste it all in, Control D, for router 2, the configurations are on the routers. Let us bring up Workstation and test that it is all working as expected. It can be convenient in our diagram to do some documentation of our IP ranges. It will make it easier to debug and to check that everything is working as it should. You'll notice that I have made a minor change here in order to have different IP spans on net 3 and net 4. So that should be adjusted in net 4 if you want to do the same, and I think you should do it. So here I just briefly demonstrated one way to do this adjustment. The routers are now configured, and we are ready to test that DHCP works on all 4 networks. On the routers, we have a number of commands that we can use to monitor the DHCP services. The bindings command tells us what MAC addresses have received what IP addresses. On router 2, we can list how many DHCP packages have been forwarded. On router 2, the DHCP statistics shows us 0, as router 2 is relaying everything over to router 1 for DHCP.